So, hello, 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 Terrance. I am so excited that you are this week's guest of this podcast episode. This is such an honor knowing you, and like you've worked on so many interesting projects, and like every time talking to you is for me already as a person so inspiring. So I cannot wait to, I don't know, like already like in the pre-discussions we had, there's going to be so many interesting discussions and insights I think you're going to share with us. And just a little bit of of an overview. You've worked on so many projects, so part of Insomniac. Like I just look at your Moby game list, which includes Spider-Man, Bioshock, Resistance, SWAT, Medal of Honor. Like it goes back. It goes back a while. I can even see you did voices for things. So, so everything from senior engine programming to a lot of special things, but also voices. So I'm super excited to hear more about your path. But again, like I would love to give you already the stage to introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be with you. Um, I, when you go through that list, it's humbling because uh, I was very fortunate. I'll just use the word lucky to work with some great people. Um, yeah, so let's see. I graduated from college in 1995, and I got a degree in math and computer science. Um, I had been, a kid who loved to play in the arcades, and so I kind of played in the arcades and got ideas, and came home and tried to reproduce those games on my computer when I was, 12 years old. Um, and so I wanted to go into computer science, but anyway, I graduated and I got a job at Ernst and Young doing management consulting. I was building database applications. I wrote a policy management system for an insurance company and a order entry system for a computer manufacturer. And I was really bored. And I thought, is this what my life is going to be like? If I have to write another call to another stored procedure on another database, I'm going to shoot myself in the head. So um, and that was about the time that somebody sent out a message and said, bye guys, I'm going west to write video games. And I called him up right up, and my hands are shaking. And I said, tell me everything you know. And he got me in touch with human resources at Activision. I called them up. I said, hey, I want a job. And this was a different day and age when you could call up Activision and say, I want a job. And they'd say, okay, well, we'll have you talk to, a lead programmer. So that's what I did. And he hired me. Anyway, I was on a path to learn game programming, and it was a little bit rocky. I have to tell you, if your start in the games industry is rocky, you're not alone. We feel your pain. Um, my introduction to the games industry, I walked into the human resources office at Activision, and I said, "I'm here. I moved. I moved from Chicago to Los Angeles for this job." And I said, "I'm here," and they said, "Oh, yeah. That project we hired you for was canceled last week, and we're not sure what to do with you. But don't worry, we'll figure something out." Um, Long story short, I went from Activision to Dreamworks pretty shortly after that, where my lead programmer had left and gone to. And that's where I worked on Taifu and Medal of Honor. Taifu was really fun. It didn't get a lot of publicity, but he was a kung fu fighting tiger waging a one-man war through ancient China. And that was really fun. That was for the PlayStation 1. And then after that, I worked on the first Medal of Honor. So I got to meet some really cool characters. One story I remember, I could go on forever. I'll break in a moment, but uh, Steven Spielberg was when you're Steven Spielberg and your kids like video games, you make a game studio. So that's what DreamWorks Interactive was. And so he had this idea. Of course, it was before he made Saving Private Ryan, but it was basically his idea for Saving Private Ryan in the shape of a video game. And so he came to look at it. He was the executive producer, and our producer, Peter Hirschman, gets up and sort of shows him the controls and then hands the control over to Steven Spielberg. And I'm this little junior programmer sitting in the corner of the room, and Steven Spielberg's going down in an alley and shooting and whatever. And he says, "This is great. Now, and by the way, we're like we're like 3 weeks from shipping. I mean, we are done. Like controllers down, pencils down, done. And Steven says, that's great. Now, when you shoot someone in the head, his helmet's going to fly off. And when you shoot him in the arm, his arm's going to fly off. And when you throw a grenade into a group, then one person's going to jump on the grenade and everybody else is going to run away. And we hadn't planned or designed or thought about any of this. And I'm like, what are we going to do? So Steven Spielberg leaves and Peter Hirschman gets up again and he says, yeah, we're not doing any of that. And I just remember, I mean, in the end, of course, we did all of that, but the concept that, Steven Spielberg's up there telling us what we're going to be doing, and then our producer says, yeah, we're not doing any of that, taught me something about what leadership is, right? Leadership is a vision, and it doesn't necessarily mean that those are the specific tasks that individuals are going to be working on. And I think I learned something valuable from that, which I can talk about more. But that's the early part of my career.
This is amazing. This is gonna be such an interesting episode. I I need to go a little bit back though. I know this is like disrupting the flow now, but if you said you already started with arcade games, like, and then reprogramming them basically all by yourself at home, I would just like give me a few more details here. This is
Well,
my
they
computer
were
science
very
heart is
they were
screaming.
very sad imitations of the arcade games, but it was the effort, it was the idea. Like I would kind of play the game and get excited about it, but I would look at it probably with a slightly different lens than a lot of other people would be looking at the video games. I would be thinking about how did they do that? Like how could I possibly? And I was programming in BASIC. I had no hope. I was programming in BASIC on a TI 99 4A and then on an Apple IIc. Like I had no hope of reproducing any semblance of the actual experience, but I had the ideas and I started with the experimentation. I'm not a big graphics guy. I've never been an expert in graphics. What I think that did was shape me into someone who's really interested in the player experience and the game mechanics, and I've always been interested in that. And so, now as a senior engine programmer at Insomniac, I like to build the system. My biggest thrill is when I'm building systems that unlock the creativity of the content creators. And so I often talk about, for example, the effects conduit, which is a system that coordinates a lot of the work in the game as far as incorporating all kinds of effects, visual effects, sound effects, dialogue. Could be rumble or camera or decal, all kinds of different effects. And these are different content creators in potentially different departments, all creating this content, and they want to get their content into the game. But ideally, they'd rather not have a gatekeeper. They'd rather not have a programmer in the middle. And the programmers really don't want to be in the middle of that stream either. So content creators really want to be able to create and introduce and iterate on their content interactively and independently. And so my biggest thrill, and the reason that I love this system and why I built it and revised it and maintained it and iterated on it over many years, is that it is sort of a prime example of unlocking the creativity of content creators. I'm not an artist. I don't have any art talent. I'm not a sound designer. I don't have any sound talent. But what I can do is I can build a system that unlocks the creativity and allows the content creators to really realize their vision in the game. If that makes sense.
This is such a pretty description, because like again I always I feel programming like is something which is actually pretty creative. It took me some time to understand this or like also try to convey it to people. It's very visual in games, but the fun fact is that we can actually like if you draw something, I cannot draw, I cannot write either nicely. So actually, but I always wanted to work somehow in a creative way. But then I figured like with programming, everything which is in my mind, I can actually like make people experience for themselves so they can be part of my dreams part of my thoughts somehow. If I put some code out there and they can walk around in my games and interact, because like this is programming in games, like everything which is interactive. So this is something which always got me really inspired. But this train of thought that you are actually like the enabler. But I would argue that what you're doing is highly creative and highly artistic, actually.
Yeah, I like that very much. It's exactly how I feel about it. Is that we as programmers, or we as engineers, or we as technology leaders are our role is to be the force multipliers and the enablers and the catalysts
Yeah.
of the recipe for for creative production. So we're involved in the creative process, even if even if our day to day isn't creative in the same way. I agree with you. It's creative in a certain respect.
Sorry, I did not want to interrupt your journey. So you directly jumped actually like from one very frustrating experience, which is like this typical one door would close, but another giant window would open for you, like Activision. Okay, this was a little bit of a not so good experience, or like a different experience. Let's put it that way. But then, tell me more about your journey.
Yeah. Okay. So I do think that I was lucky in a lot of respects to work with some excellent teams. Um, uh, After Dreamworks, I worked at it. I moved to Boston, and I worked for a little while at Dragon Systems. I couldn't find a job in the games industry, and so I worked at Dragon Systems doing research and development in speech recognition. We were building a large vocabulary continuous speech recognition for handheld devices. Kind of think about Siri, but when Palm Pilot was state of the art. So we were doing early development on that kind of thing, and I actually had the greatest leader when I was at Dragon Systems. His name was Joel Gould, and brilliant guy who always seemed to have thought of everything ahead of time, and always had the right solution that he would sort of just pull out of his back pocket at exactly the moment that we needed it. And he was very humble, and he was a good inspiration to me in terms of understanding what good leadership looks like. And so I can talk more about that. But anyway, and then I worked at Irrational Games. We worked on a game called The Lost, which was never shipped, about Dante's Inferno and descending through the levels of hell. And then we worked on a little prototype for a game called Bioshock, which kind of been sort of shopped around to different publishers, and nobody was interested in it because we didn't have any reputation, right? And so instead we did more sort of contract development. We did, it wasn't contract development. We were doing our own titles, but it was not our IP, I should say. So we worked on SWAT 4 and Tribe's Vengeance. And then we did do our own IP called Freedom Force. I didn't work directly on that. That was an Australia studio of Irrational Games. But then after we had some experience, and by the way, SWAT 4 was a wonderful project because I loved it. I thought it was a great game, but also I got to do so much in that game. I mean, every aspect of gameplay I was involved in, and it was really, really fun. After we had that reputation, Ken was able to go around to publishers again and say, look at what we've done. Look at this vision. It's a spiritual successor to System Shock, and here's what we can do with it. And then publishers were interested, and we built Bioshock. And I left during Bioshock because I was having kids and wanted to focus on family. So that was part of that journey. And after that, I went. Okay, so that's when I started at Insomniac Games. The year was 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved my time at Insomniac Games. I worked there for 5 years from 2005 to 2010. And I eventually left because there were all kinds of new technologies cropping up. And I felt like I was going to miss them. They were going to pass me by. And I really wanted to work on things like web and cloud and mobile and things like that. And database. Ironically, how I said in the beginning that If I ever had to write another call to another stored procedure on a database, I was going to shoot myself in the head. Well, later on, it's funny how things change, but database was becoming a big thing in the games industry as far as analytics and multiplayer and things like that. And I was like, hey, I need to learn about that. So anyway, so I left Insomniac Games and I was on a 10-year leadership path, right? I wanted to be the vice president and the director and the technology person and the head of technology and all of that. So I worked at a couple of startups. I worked for a augmented reality company called Augmento, doing location-based and augmented reality games for mobile devices. Think about Pokemon Go, but like a few years before Pokemon Go. That's what we were doing, and I was the VP of game development. And also I worked at Servios, which did VR games. I was the VP of platform, which we were building a social discovery platform, basically discovering other players in VR so that you can, build a community and go into games and play VR games together. And I thought that was really cool. And then there was Riot Games in the middle, which I can talk a little bit about that. But I also got a lot of inspiration about culture at Riot Games because they had a really inspirational culture.
What did you do at Riot?
I was a programmer on games. So for the first year, I was working on featured game modes for League of Legends. And then I moved into a role as a tech lead on game systems for League of Legends. And then I moved into R&D, working on new titles for Riot Games. At the time, we were Riot Games, but we only had one game, right? And I learned some interesting things about the business of games there also. So, for example, they started working on League of Legends in 2006, and League of Legends shipped in 2009. And when it shipped, the store didn't work. Like, you couldn't buy anything. And I think that this was an interesting lesson about being fast, being lean, being quick to market, and don't try to boil the ocean, right? Don't try to solve the world's problems. Pick what is key and focal to what you're doing, and then try to do that better than everyone, and don't worry about the rest. The rest will kind of fall into place over time if you have the right inspiration, if you have the right motivation, if you have determination, then the pieces will fall into place. But figure out what your core mechanic is. Figure out what your ultimate goal is. And then I worked at Disney. I was a director of technology for Disney Parks, working on a couple of media and entertainment products at Disney.
Park. This is something which I find so interesting because Disney Park is something very different, like also in terms of game design and challenges and tech and programming compared to like the Disney game. Like people hearing this podcast or watching might think immediately of Disney, the games we know, but like the park experience is something entirely different. I would love to hear more.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Disney was really a formative experience because it taught me a lot of things about the business. Some things that I definitely did want to imitate, and a lot of things that I definitely don't want to imitate. I wasn't an engineer. I was actively discouraged from doing any hands-on work when I was a director of technology at Disney, because in large organizations, directors, for a lot of reasons, I think leadership is discouraged from being hands-on because we would in some ways be ineffective at our job if we were too concerned about about the details. I don't necessarily believe that, but that was sort of the culture. So for example, we were working on I was responsible for Play Disney Parks, which is a mobile app with companion games, games that are companions to the rides in Disney World and Disneyland. And so at one point we decided we were going to change our engine from sort of an internal HTML based engine to using Unity. And we had plug in experiences that plug into the game platform. And so I needed a layer over Unity to allow, vendors and third parties to plug their experiences into the platform. And so I said, I'm the only one here who really has experience with Unity. I'm the only one who has experience with building games and that kind of architectural software engineering. I'll do that. And my boss said, you should delegate that. And I said, but there's nobody who has any experience doing that kind of thing. He said, you should delegate that. So um, this goes into sort of what shaped my current attitudes about what good leadership looks like, and I could go into that some more. But that was my experience. The sort of the point that I wanted to arrive at is my experience, and then the pandemic hit, and Disney parks put us all on furlough because all the parks were closed and there was no work, and the cruise lines weren't sailing and the hotels weren't taking reservations. So Disney parks really wasn't doing a whole lot for the early part of the pandemic. And so obviously, with thousands of people working on parks, they put us all on furlough. And I had to be very introspective and think about what do I really want to do. And that's when I went back to Insomniac Games, because I decided, and I'm an engineer. I'm not a leader. I'm not a lead programmer. I'm not a director. I'm not in technology leadership at all. I'm a programmer, and I love being where I am. And it's kind of I think it's an interesting path, because having been on this 10-year leadership track and being fairly, having done some really interesting things along the way, why would I end up going to a place where I have no leadership responsibility? I used to be in meetings all the time at Disney, right? I would have 2 or 3 meetings at any hour, and I would have to decide which meeting was more important for me to go to, because I couldn't be in 2 meetings at the same time. I tried to do that a few times. But and now I have maybe 3 or 4 meetings a week. And I like that. It's because I'm in a culture where I subscribe to and I believe in the leadership culture. And so I've been back at Insomniac Games for 5 years. So I was there from 2005 to 2010. I was away from Insomniac Games for 10 years, from 2010 to 2020. And then I joined Insomniac Games again, and I've been there for 5 years. So it's a total of 10 years at Insomniac with a 10-year gap right in the middle.
How easy is it to just go back? Would you just knock and say, hey, people, I would love to join again? Or how does this work?
Again, I was very lucky. I think that Insomniac is a really special place. And a lot of the people that I worked with at Insomniac from 2005 to 2010 were still there and are still there. And so I was able to say, hey, I know I've been away for a while. I'd really like to consider coming back. And the interesting thing also was that I hadn't been programming intensely for a while, right? Because I had been in such leadership positions that, some of my engineering skills were a little bit weaker, but they trusted me. They believed in me. And I was able to make the case that I can pick those things up and talk about some of the contributions that I had made to Insomniac before I left, and why I had left, and the reasons that I had wanted to leave, because there were experiences that I had gained along the way that I was really eager to get. Of course, after I left Insomniac, they were doing all of those things, web and cloud and database and mobile and all of those things. So if I had stayed, I would have gotten those experiences anyway. But okay, so, you weave in and weave out sometimes. That's the way it works.
But I like I would have 2 questions now, like going different directions. Like I think the super important one, which I find like extremely interesting. So you had decisions to make, and you actually like made I think pretty rough decisions where you decided to change the company, change your own focus, and then make experiences to actually it feels like almost like a self-discovery journey, like where you in the end you found, okay, your path is actually the tech, the programming path, and not so much the like full career leadership challenge. Is there anything you learned on the way, which could have have would have been a shortcut, or like how do you feel about your journey? Is there or like any advices you would give yourself in retrospect?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It was certainly a journey, discovering what's important to me, and also what's important changes over your life, right? Earlier in my career, of course, I was thinking about, how can I make an impact on the industry? Can I make great games? Can I, can I make a great resume? And then I think later in my career, what is important to me, there are a lot of things. Yes, it's the tech. I think I'm certainly better at technology than I am at leadership. Let's put it that way. I work with some excellent technology practitioners. They're a group of people, I think, who have all the reason in the world to have huge egos, but they actually have no egos, and that's one thing that I like. So the reason I mention it is because, to me, the most important thing right now is culture and values. We talk about mission and vision and culture and values. We talked about that a lot at Riot, and culture is really important to me. I also care about product, like what are we building, right? I care about audience. Who are we serving, right? I care about the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. Is it interesting? Is it fulfilling? Is it satisfying? Is it meaningful? That kind of thing. But really, my guiding light right now is culture. I think because some of that honestly was missing in my experience in Disney Parks leadership. I'll mention a little bit about that. I'm a fan of the concept of servant leadership, that the leader is chosen, not that leadership is given, not taken. The idea that a good leader is primarily a trust vehicle, a person who instills and promotes trust among the people that are working with them. And I believe that a good leader is one who trusts and supports and then gets out of the way so that talented people can do their best work. Some of the leadership culture at Disney was very heavy on accountability, understanding, who's responsible if something goes wrong, sort of positioning yourself to be able to take credit for the work done by your team, even if it's not work that you personally did. And so I was working to be a buffer between that leadership culture and the development culture, which again, I'm a big fan of trusting and supporting and then getting out of the way so that talented people can do their best work. And being at that intersection, at that buffer, wasn't a necessarily safe or comfortable place to be. So, when the pandemic hit, I was feeling pretty good about the idea of pursuing a role where I could be really satisfied with culture above many other things.
It's interesting. It's such an interesting journey. What I find also interesting is again like the experiences made during the pandemic, but also you were still part of Insomniac when Sony acquired Insomniac, right? Or
actually, when I joined Insomniac, Sony acquired Insomniac before I joined the second time. So I joined in 2020, and I think the acquisition happened in 2019. But by the time I joined Insomniac again, it was already a first-party Sony studio.
Did you notice a lot of shift in what you just mentioned, like company culture? Because this is always like a little bit of a question, and like I think many people on devs are scared of. Did you notice anything about that? If you wanted to talk about this,
very little. I think that the transition was gradual for two reasons. One is that Insomniac has a strong culture, and I give a lot of credit to Sony in recognizing. First of all, I think Sony has a good culture also, and recognizing that the culture of the studio is a very important factor, and not trying to jump in and change too many things too quickly, especially. And I think Sony's taken a very deliberate and considerate approach to making those changes.
So I think, like, given we're already so much in the topic, I really want to go back to the personal inspirations and journeys, but I would move this to a later part and would now maybe directly jump into like two topics, like it's super smart, like okay, but everything you're saying is so inspiring for follow-up questions, so I don't know exactly where to pick up, so maybe you decide where you think the would be most interesting to go next. But I would love to learn more about like your current work at Insomniac slash Sony, what you're doing there now, what is exciting right now. But on the other hand, I think afterwards it would be super interesting to learn more, since we heard already so many interesting takes on that, about the concept of business culture, because this seems to be a topic which is actually like really shaped you quite a lot, and I think you have so interesting thoughts on that. So those are the two roads I would love to go next, and I don't know, up to you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm also, and I'm also interested to hear if any of what I'm saying, sounds related. If you've had any related experiences in your journey, because I like to hear about how the things I think and feel relate to other people's experiences.
I
So
one point I want to make here, like again, like I think like my experiences might be very different because of my background, but so many things you already said resonate a lot. So whether it's an academic culture, which is also known to be a little bit of on the challenging side, or the deaf culture, which is known to be a little bit of a challenging side, I think there are really interesting overlaps. And one thing I have to point out, which is not related to me as a person, but I love reading, and I'm very inspired always to read about memoirs, whether it's about people or about companies. And I've been always super intrigued by the memoir from Bob Iger about like how they formed Disney, which you probably have next to you, like oh, there we go, yes, the ride of a lifetime. I adored the book. I thought the visions here are really smart, and again, like since you have been part of that, I would love to, of course, learn more. And like also the Pixar book, I forgot the name though, from so what was the name? It's red. Like, give me a few seconds, maybe distract in the meantime the viewers before we're starting, and I'll jump in with this book later on. But again,
yeah,
that's why
that's right. We didn't prepare that ahead of time. I just happened to have that on the shelf right next to me. But he is an inspirational character. I'll tell you a quick story, very very funny. I got involved in the Disney triathlon team. It's the
didn't see
Nautica.
that
They
coming.
participate. What's that?
I didn't see that coming.
Well, they participate in the Nautica Malibu Triathlon each year that benefits the Children's Hospital LA. And I liked some people who were involved in the triathlon, so I got involved, and I did. I was on a relay team 2 years in a row, and then and so I was doing the cycling portion of the triathlon. It's small. It's not. There's nothing. It's not a. I'm not a huge athlete or anything, but it was fun. And so after the triathlon, there's like a big tent where they have breakfast and food and stuff. And so I sat down at the tent, and my wife's sitting on my right, and she's a psychologist. She's not in the games industry or the entertainment industry. And so I'm sitting there eating, and Bob Iger sits down at the seat directly on the left of me. And he says, "Hi, I'm Bob." And I said, I know, nice to meet you. And my wife looks over and says, "Oh yeah, I bet you're Bob Iger, aren't you?" And I gave her one of these elbows, and I'm like, this is Bob Iger. I'm not kidding. This is exactly how it happened. So anyway, he is an inspirational figure. Of course, yeah, he's very charming and very friendly, and I have a lot of respect for him.
from the top of my head, of course, I fully remembered without Googling or anything the name of the other book, which is Catmull's Creativity Inc. Which I like. If you like the Bob Iger book, this book I also find super inspiring, because like this is a little bit the Pixar story, and a little bit again, you as a computer scientist will enjoy this. There are a lot of interesting references also to computer graphics, Ivan Sutherland, and Lucasfilms, and also an interesting journey to make.
Yeah, very fun.
So, the two topics. Should we go for your life at Insomniac now, or do you want to
right,
go the business culture route?
right. Okay, yeah. So I'm a senior engineer at Insomniac Games, senior engine programmer, I suppose. So I'm in the core group, and I'm focused on infrastructure, which involves basically tools and systems that apply to all the games. So I'm not dedicated to a particular game title. Of course, I'm limited in what I can say, but I work on tools, which again goes back to what I think we were talking before we started recording. We were talking about the idea of being an enabler and a force multiplier for people making great stuff, right? And so this sort of plays to my passion as far as being enabling talented people to do their best work, right? So that's the work that I'm doing at Insomniac. You know, we have our own engine. We mentioned we were talking about this earlier, but I won't go into too much detail. But we've made the choice to, through the history of Insomniac, to maintain our own core technology. And there are certainly days that I wonder, what if we had been, an Unreal licensee, and we were making Unreal games, but we're able to focus our attention on really the features that will make the greatest impact in exactly precisely the games that we make. So our team is much smaller, obviously. Our engine team is much smaller, obviously, than Epic's Unreal Engine team. But we're able to, and so we're not solving all of the same problems that they are. We're solving specifically the problems that matter most to the specific games that we're working on. And so it's been rewarding. When I was working on SWAT 4 and Tribe's Vengeance and Bioshock, I was heavily immersed in Unreal Engine land. And when I was working on NBA King of the Court, I was very immersed in Unity land. So I've used different engines, and so there are all kinds of interesting trade-offs between building your own core technology, which of course is a huge investment, and also versus licensing technology from some of the big technology providers. So that's an interesting balancing act. How I had mentioned earlier about don't try to boil the ocean, right? When young aspiring game developers come to me and say, I want to make it. By the way, I'll step back a little bit. I didn't get here by myself, right? I have not become, a game developer on my own merits. I have stood on the shoulders of giants and had great mentors and great leaders who taught me what to value. And so I feel like I have an ability and a responsibility and an obligation to pass on that kindness to others. So I do talk to aspiring developers. I love talking to indie developers. I love their passion. They remind me why I got into the industry and why I continue to love doing what I do. So when young developers say, I want to get into games, how do I become a game developer? I say make games. Because the barrier to entry for game development now is gone. When I was young, there were no game development programs. You couldn't go to school for game development. So that's why I studied math and computer science. Now you can do that. And if you wanted to build a game, when I was young, you would write everything. There weren't any libraries really to import. But now you've got Unity and Unreal, and you can go wild and make amazing stuff that it's almost like, plugging your brain into the computer and transferring your creative game ideas onto the screen. It's almost that easy. So so that's a good way to do it. So
I just one point there, because it's a little bit the good, but also the bad at the same time. Because now, since it's so easy, it's also like accessible to so many people, and many people are like either like exploiting it, for instance, and pushing so many games out of onto Steam without maybe like the same heart like and blood I don't know. I hope you know where like I try to go to with this point, but it's a little bit difficult because again it's becoming, because it's so accessible, which is super awesome because now more people can create like make the most creative games, but the most creative games are maybe not seen anymore because there's so much crap already all out there because it's so easy to just publish anything. So this is
yeah, it's interesting. There's such a huge spectrum of entertainment products out there, right? And this mirrors the entire communications industry, right? I mean, you had the printing press, and people could distribute things that were printed, and then you had telegrams, and then you had radio, and then you had TV, and then you had cinema, and then you had TV, and then you have computers and the web, and all of these things have added to mechanisms that existed before, right? They haven't supplanted it, right? We still have newspapers, we still have radio, we still have, you know, we still have TV and movies, right? Those don't go away, but we add to them, and I think similar things are happening in the games industry, right? We had arcade games, and then we had console games, and before that we had PC games, and then we have mobile games, and we still have all of those things, right? So I think it's interesting that there's such a diversity, but what you pointed out is critical, that um, sometimes it's hard to filter through everything and find the hidden gems, and you want the gems to be able to shine, and maybe the mechanisms that exist are not the best ones for identifying what are where are the gems and where's sort of the cruft. um, I tell early developers to focus on your core mechanic, right? And this is kind of in contrast to what I was thinking about, is this is kind of in contrast to building your own engine, because if you build your own engine, that's a huge investment, and is that really the core of what you're doing? So it's a very tough decision to make to do it that way. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I think you're going to end up with a gem if you focus on your core mechanic, right? What makes your title distinct and unique and special compared to other things that are out there. And talking about the huge spectrum, you and I were talking about AAA development a while back, and the AAA industry. I can say some of these things because I have absolutely no authority and no particular information, so I'm completely going on gut. My thoughts and comments don't represent anything on the part of Sony or Insomniac or anyone else. I just think that the AAA industry is in a difficult position, right? Because during the pandemic, we built up expectations of very large scale, very long running, big story games that are very expensive to build. And that means that it's very risky for companies to invest in those kinds of titles. That's probably why we are seeing less new IP. There's a lot more falling back to the less risky IPs that already exist that people know and love. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to see where the industry goes. Obviously, we've seen the industry shrinking over the last year or so, and I don't necessarily think that it's going to 100% recover right away. I think it's going to take a little bit more time, but it will. I have seen cycles in the industry, right? I started working on games in 1997 on the original PlayStation. And so I've seen a number of cycles, right? I've had titles on every PlayStation generation, and Xbox generations and PC generations and mobile generations, and I've seen a lot of it, and we will get through this, right? The industry will come out strong, and so if you're early in your career and you're looking uh, to specialize in the games industry, be patient. It'll take some time. It'll take some effort, as it always does. As it always has. But the industry will come out strong. I'm very confident.
This is so as an industry veteran, what do you think? Like I heard so many times already that there is this cycle, yes, but some also say that at the moment it's a little bit more on the not so nice side compared also to the previous experiences. What is your thought or experience here?
Yeah, I think during the pandemic, we all knew that this was different. This was something that we in our lifetimes hadn't really experienced. And I think we're seeing ripple effects. And I think we probably will continue to see ripple effects from the pandemic. Even in the coming years. I'd say 20 years from now, people will still be saying, "Oh yeah, this changed during the pandemic." I think it is a once in a lifetime experience. So the contraction, the adjustment, the changes in the industry that we're seeing today are different and special and unique. And we haven't quite seen this in the industry. So that's why I think that the changes in the industry are a little bit wider and deeper and longer than they have been in the past. So yes, that's true. But at the end of the day, the fundamentals are there, right? People love interactive experiences, right? People love playing with their friends online. People love the experience of being someone they're not in a game. These things don't change, and people. There is disposable income in the world, and a lot of people will continue to choose to spend their disposable income on interactive entertainment experiences. That's not going to change. There's always going to be an opportunity. And the truth is, the games industry over the past several years has expanded dramatically. So the fact that we're experiencing some difficult times, I don't think it's going to be a really long-term phenomenon.
We are already in the middle of this future outlook, actually, which I don't know, this sort of happens, but I would be so interested to also hear from your point of view, because you have so much experience also like in the realm of AR, VR, XR, like very early on already. I have to ask you, what is your take on that, like also for the future of game development? Will this play
Oh
a
boy,
role?
yeah. You're asking me things that I love talking about, but I'm not an expert on any of this. So please take everything that I say with a grain of sand, with a grain of salt or a grain of sand, because I'm not an industry expert on these matters, but I can give you my personal take. I think that VR is super compelling. If you've ever experienced a game in high-end VR, it really feels like you're transported to a different world. It's kind of like scuba diving. I love scuba diving because you're really transported to another planet, and that's what VR can do. When you're in VR and you're playing a game and you come out, I know the experience of taking off the VR headset and saying, "Oh yeah, I remember this is where my body is." but my mind was somewhere else. So it's a really transformative experience, but it has a lot of challenges. It's not comfortable for everybody. It's not comfortable for most people for a long period of time. It's expensive. You need a lot of hardware. You have to pick the right experiences. Not every VR experience is great or transformative. There are a lot of challenges, and I think it's going to be a while. We're starting to see new entries in that space also, right? Because we're seeing the Meta Ray-Ban collaboration with glasses, which didn't have any visual component, but the new one does have a visual component. I think as the barrier to entry and the hardware cost and all of that starts coming down to general consumer levels, like it has for mobile phones, right? It used to be only certain business people would have pagers or cell phones or something like that. Now everybody has them, and very high end, very powerful, very compute intensive devices there everyone's carrying around in their pockets. When I think there will be a day when VR makes that sort of breakout, has that breakout moment, and I think then there will be a time when VR is ubiquitous, but it's not quite there yet. And augmented reality similarly, right? They're different experiences. The big difference between AR and VR, I think, is that AR is about augmenting the space that you're actually in, and VR is about teleporting you to a different place. So it's really a question of are you being transported to a different place, or are you augmenting the space you're actually in?
Do you have a preference? Like, is there any experience you like to have? Like, I'm a huge VR fan. I love VR so much. That's why I had to ask this question, right? Because I love being in different worlds or doing things which I'm usually not able to or supposed to do.
Yeah, they're very different. I mean, I think they're for different purposes. Honestly, I think the entertainment opportunities in VR are much greater than the entertainment opportunities in augmented reality. Right? Augmented reality is about collecting information. It's more about collecting information and again modifying the space that you're actually in. When I was working at Augmento on augmented reality, we did kind of struggle to find, really compelling entertainment experiences in augmented reality. They exist, they are there. Especially now that we can do SLAM, simultaneous locating and mapping. That was sort of the holy grail of augmented reality at the time, and now we can do it. So we can have virtual objects fixed at points in the real world. Before we could do that, it was much more difficult to have entertainment experiences, and now there's a lot more you can do with it. But yeah, the notion that games are about transporting you to a different time in a different place in a different world is much better suited to virtual reality, I think.
But it's quite interesting. Like, if I look a little bit like at your past experiences or like your current experiences, one theme is sort of a little bit there, which is a very close like cooperation often with the world of movies. Because whether it's with Dreamworks meeting Steven Spielberg, whether it's like hanging out or meeting Bob Iger, working with Disney, whether it's now like with Insomniac, obviously with Sony, Marvel, this is like quite a theme in your history.
It's true. It's interesting. Certainly, the movie industry and the games industry have many touch points, many overlaps. I worked with a guy at Augmento. His name is Tim Hernandez, and he's now at Disney. He's responsible for a lot of the interface between Marvel and other third parties. So, there's a lot of overlap there. There's and yeah, I actually have encountered Steven Spielberg on multiple occasions. When I was working, I mentioned about when I was working at DreamWorks and he came to look at Medal of Honor. I also spent a little bit of time with him when I was working at Survios, when we were doing the social platform for VR, and he came to look at what we were doing, and I got to put the VR headset on him, and he said, I think I know you. I said, yeah, well, I worked at DreamWorks Interactive way back. I said, oh, okay. So yeah, there's certainly a lot of overlap between sort of the AAA game space, especially, and the movie industry. I think that's natural, right? Because they are similar mediums. It's all about it can be about telling stories, telling compelling stories, and games may be interactive and movies are more passive, but to a large extent um, there's a similar goal in both media.
Yeah, but there are some companies which are working way more like closely with the movie industry, and it looks like your past has been quite shaped of that. It seems to be also like a little bit, which is obvious, location dependent, because I don't think, like, if I think of companies in Austria, or studios in Austria or Germany, which might where the movie industry is there, but if you're at locations where you don't have the vivid movie industry like you have in LA, for instance, I think this also shapes a little bit the games or like the industry you're in.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be in the LA area. There are
But
great things about LA, and there are
you
things that
lived
aren't.
in
But
Chicago, Boston, LA.
yeah, that's right. I was born in Oklahoma, so I kind of made a circuit around the United States.
Your favorite?
Oh, I don't know. They all have pluses and minuses, to be sure. Um, I love traveling. I love seeing the world. I get to meet wonderful people like you in Germany. I've spoken in Prague, and a couple months ago I was in Lisbon. So it's really great to see different cultures and different people, and especially to see how they are interacting and contributing to the games industry.
So rolling back to 10 minutes of like before, we were at Insomniac now. So how is your life at Insomniac now? Whatever you can talk about, what are exciting projects? What are things you find interesting, or I don't know, whatever you can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly limited what I can talk about. Mostly, basically, what I can say is things that are public. As you may know, Insomniac's working on Wolverine, and
I was hoping we're talking about this a little bit.
yeah. I mean, I can't go into any details, of course, but we are working on it, and look out for it. I think you'll be pleased, especially if you've played Spider-Man Miles Morales, or Spider-Man 2. If you enjoyed those titles, and I hope you did, I think you'll probably enjoy Wolverine as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think everyone is really excited. There's a lot of interesting titles where we're looking, like everyone is sort of like looking forward to in the coming years. And I think this is certainly on the top of this list for many of us. Um, yeah, then leadership, business culture. Um,
So when we were talking before, you mentioned kind of things that have inspired me
mhm.
in other types of media, movies, or books or stories or something like that. So there may be a couple that I could recommend if you're interested.
Yes, yes. But before we go to the like those personal stories, we need to make the proper introduction there, because like there was something else which I found super inspiring when you started this call, is actually your background. I thought this is like a made up background actually, like because it looks so nice
Oh,
and there's so many interesting elements. Can you tell us more? And then let's
well, they're
maybe.
kind of random. I didn't prepare anything for this. These just happen to be a few things that are up in my room. This is a plaque from Ratchet Deadlocked, which was the first title that I shipped when I joined Insomniac Games. Actually, when I joined Insomniac, it was for a game that became called Resistance. In fact, I recommended the name Resistance. Ted Price sent out an email saying, we have to think of a name for a game, and what should we call it? And so people emailed in their suggestions, and I suggested Resistance because it's a double meaning. There's Nathan Hale's resistance to the alien virus, and the human resistance against the Chimeran invasion. So I thought Resistance was a good name. Anyway, that's the title that I was hired for at Insomniac, but they were also working on Ratchet Deadlocked when I started, and so that shipped while I was there. And this was the last plaque that they made. They don't make plaques for games anymore, which is too bad because that was really fun. This is this is from Bioshock, of course. This is my clock, which is not set. These are my maternal grandparents. They have an interesting history as well. And these are some illuminated maps that used to hang in their home. So it's just it's cozy. It reminds me about my heritage and who I am, and reminds me that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and that I always need to remember that I don't deserve this. I've been lucky, and I've worked with really great people.
You certainly deserve this, and it's a very lovely conversation. And you seem to be super humble about many things. But I mean, again, this is you worked really hard, and it's quite interesting. Like just hearing your path. You made tough decisions, smart decisions, and all of them shaped you and formed you. And here we are with the topics for the what else did which shape you, what inspired you. And again, this is always like one of my favorite parts: books, movies, games, music. What are things that are shaping you, inspiring you?
Sure. Well, there are a lot of them. I mean, I like consuming all kinds of media, probably too much. But uh, as far as movies, I really like Real Genius. People always remember the scene at the end of Real Genius where house explodes in popcorn. But if you watch it again, it's a comedy, but it also has some deep messages about where passion can lead you and where passion can mislead you. It has stories about when you have a gift, what can you do with that gift? What should you do with that gift? Right? Real Genius is about it's one of Val Kilmer's very early movies, and so I love that. I also really like Hackers, which is a really corny movie, but it is so spot on in terms of what the hacker culture was in the late 80s and the early 90s, and I'm very nostalgic about that time period. So that's really fun. It's totally corny and unbelievable, but the attitudes and the state of mind of the characters is really very realistic and really spot on about sort of the hacker culture in those days, and it's really fun. As far as books, I really love this author named Werner Vinge. He wrote a book called A Deepness in the Sky, and there was a sequel called The Fire Upon the Deep. A Deepness in the Sky is really a phenomenal work, and I just love it. I can't even begin to explain why it's so deep and so prophetic. Werner Vinge passed away last year, and he was a big loss to the community. I didn't love everything that he wrote, I have to say, but I did a little bit of investigation trying to understand how this happened. That I love that novel so much, and I'm not really particularly drawn to his other works. I thought maybe his wife wrote actually wrote A Deepness in the Sky because it's so different from the other things, and so I went and I read some of the works of his wife, who is also an author, and it's completely different. So that doesn't explain it. I can't really explain it, but A Deepness in the Sky is quite motivational. Um, I also love Steven Pinker, who writes a lot about language and the mind. I read a book that he wrote called How the Mind Works, and it's really interesting because I thought we don't know how the mind works. I thought that it's a mystery, that it's so complex that we'll never quite understand how the mind works. And then I read this and I realized, well, actually, he's kind of reverse engineered how the mind works, and he really does get it. He touches on several theories, like the computational theory of mind, and he explains how some of that theory does explain a lot of what we see, but actually it doesn't completely explain. It doesn't quite fit how we think and how we operate. Um, but it's fascinating, and so I recommend that one as well. And I like also we've talked a little bit about leadership, and so I love servant leadership, and I love titles that talk about um, the power of positive leadership, for example, things like that. So those are the things that I would recommend if you're interested in expanding your mind.
Music.
Music. Um, I'm probably the only Catatonia and Yanni fan on the planet. Um, I really like I like all kinds of music, but I do gravitate towards um, progressive metal. Um, I like Catatonia and Opeth, and some of the newer groups like Breaking Benjamin and uh, Leprous. So there's some really good music out there, and I like music from all kinds of genres.
That's why I had to ask. I sort of knew, so that's why I had to be a little bit like very good.
I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, I like talking about that too.
Very, very good. Very good music taste, I have to say. What games? What games do you play? What games formed you? Were there specific games in the past which sort of like, but they're arcade games, which said, "Wow, eventually I want to make games like these," or "Wow, this might be inspiring for my work."
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm kind of funny in that respect because working in the games industry, everything's relative, of course, but working in the games industry, I don't consider myself a core gamer. I'm usually playing what I'm working on, or at least things that are related to what I'm working on. So that gives me a little bit of variety. I mean, I never would have been a League of Legends player, except that I worked on League of Legends, so I became a big League of Legends player. um, but I like all kinds. I'm playing Death Stranding now, which is a little older, but I'm really enjoying it. I kind of feel like, well, the second one's coming out soon, so I probably should play the first one. Um, and I really love the Metal Gear Solid series, so I'm really looking forward to Snake Eater Delta coming out because I love that, and I can't wait to see the remake on using more modern technology. So those are some of the things that I'm looking at.
Weird question, but is there any game you wished you would have worked on, or is there any dream collaboration you would?
Um, I admire Valve. I admire their titles. They seem to be really just spot on with everything they do. Uh, I I love the Portal series. The humor and the puzzling and the so I have an affinity for Valve and some of their titles.
In the pre-discussion, we also, like I already mentioned a little bit, like in general, I would love to, whatever you feel comfortable talking about, a bit also what is like shaping your, like, how to put it, how to, would you free your head outside of work, for instance? Do you have any hobby? Because like when I talk with developers or like recently, like we have talked also to streamers, and I can just also like speak for myself, like sitting in front of the PC all day, and like also if it sounds super fun to work on games, then coming home, the I don't think most of us then as a hobby tend to play more computer games. But like, do you have anything which what are your hobbies? What are you doing as a little bit of a like I don't know
Yeah,
counterbalance maybe?
yeah, that's interesting. My hobbies are pretty simple. I have a family, and I like to spend time with my family as much as I can, as much as they let me, because my kids are mostly grown up now, and so they have their own lives, and so I need to be proactive about like, hey, let's get together, let's do this. But earlier on, I derived a lot of satisfaction from spending time with my family as much as I could. I mean, in the early days of the games industry, that was difficult, to be honest with you. To the work-life balance wasn't quite there. It's better now than it used to be, but it's not. It's not there, at least not for everyone. Um, I'm also a religious guy. I'm Jewish, and I am involved in my Jewish community and the celebrating the Jewish holidays and things like that, and learning. I also learn a lot about the traditional texts, and so, I'm I speak Hebrew pretty well, and I learn and read a lot of the um, ancient and traditional Jewish texts. So I'm pretty familiar with that. Um, and I also love all kind. I'm a curious kind of guy, so I like tinkering and playing around with things. I like to build some things. I've
What is
been playing.
this? What is this
This
doing?
is this is a Raspberry
Mm-hmm.
Pi um, with a accelerometer and gyroscope component and a little 8x8 LED grid. And so I was making a 2D level, 2D digital level.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is one of the things that I've been playing around with. I'm not a hardware guy per se, but I like to, I'm curious about all kinds of things. So these are some of the things that.
Yeah, sometimes like it's nice to actually like like software engineering is great, but sometimes it's super nice if you build something and you can actually touch things.
Yeah.
What are other things you could recommend eventually others like as with the focus of work-life balance because you already mentioned it because I think in the gaming industry this is a huge topic these days, mental health, work-life balance. Are there any specific things you can recommend which help you or which might like are general recommendations?
Yes, and I'm going to recommend it to you, and I'm going to recommend to all your listeners because I'm actually recommending it to myself. I
Mm.
have to remind myself that physical fitness and exercise make a huge difference, and I know you know this because you're an active person. I need to remind myself to get out there, get to the gym, be active, be outdoors, because it makes such a huge difference in mental state, in mental acuity, emotions, and mood. When I'm exercising regularly, I eat better, I sleep
Mm.
better, I think better, and I feel better. And I need to remind myself about that because I'm not natively a very active person, but I really like being active, and I feel much better when I do. So I'm I'm telling you, but I'm really telling myself that being active makes a huge difference.
What activities, what exercises do you like, and how often is your target?
Yeah. Well, I try to get to the gym a few times a week. I usually make it a couple times a week, and I like lifting weights. I like doing some aerobics. Um, my wife is great because she convinces me to go hiking with her, which I always enjoy, but never think of myself. Um, I've been interested in cycling. Um, I try different sports periodically. I like usually like paddle style, so racquetball or tennis, or lately we've been playing pickleball during lunchtime at work, which is fun.
I've heard of that. Like, just it's
It's becoming really popular, I guess maybe just in the US, but it's kind of a combination. It's kind of like ping pong played on a court, kind of like tennis, kind of like racquetball, but the ball is soft, so it sort of dies when you hit it. When it hits the ground, it kind of dies. So that's fun. Just get out, just have fun.
Yeah, like I
If there aren't too many fires, right? There have been fires here, so being outside can be a little bit dangerous. So you know, be smart about it too.
yeah. Yeah, this is such a weird time. Yeah, the like going to the gym is something which I sort of do just to do other sports because I hate lifting weights. I hate going to the gym and I just do it because then I can become better in climbing or mountain biking or skiing or like the things I actually like to do. So this is like for me something like the homework.
I love it. Yeah, you're doing it the right way. I mean, you're doing it in nature. You're doing, your activities are based in real life as opposed to like going indoors and simulating the experiences.
But I like forced myself in the beginning. So I was, I think, also pretty overworked, very close to burnout, very close. Like there was several reasons why I did not feel particularly well, and then I reshaped everything. My entire schedule, and so for instance, like in my calendar, it's noted like that the weekends are reserved for mountain things. I want to do some outdoor things, and I know that at least one day of the weekend I will be on a mountain usually, whether it's, I don't know, hiking or mountain biking or whatever. And no matter how much work I have, because I'm fine to go back home, and even if it's a Sunday and I want and feel better to, I don't know, answer 10 emails, I'll do that. But like I know that I will work so much better, my brain works so much better, and I have so much more motivation and inspiration for the coming week if I do this. So this is sort of like a rule for me now.
That's amazing. I have so much respect for that, and I I would love to learn how you do it. I know that you're an active and busy professional as well, and I don't know that I necessarily am able to have such a balance to really push myself to do the things that I know I should be doing. But maybe you could, maybe I can turn the tables a little bit and ask you, how do you balance all of the work that you have? And there must be so many competing priorities on you on a moment to moment basis. How are you able to juggle all of that?
So what helped me a lot, that I also put like all the sport things and priority things into my calendar. So because like this is something which I sort of did not do, but now like I try to do sports like every day an hour, because if you work for at least 8 hours a day and you have, the day would be 8 hours of sleep. Like I want to get 8 hours of sleep, then 8 hours of work most probably. Then there is another 8 hours left, right? So that's actually not so little. And if
Huh.
you dedicate at least like 1 hour, maybe two, and just like put it into your calendar every day, for again sports activities, for instance, if you like to meet your friends, you can also like do, I don't know, for instance, like bouldering is something which I love to do with other people, because it's even sometimes we had almost like work meetings combined with hiking meetings, where we try to discuss this while we hike a small mountain or anything like this, or like go to the bouldering gym, to the climbing gym together. So also trying to combine those things, but again, like put all those things into the calendar, because again, this is, I think, why I sort of burned out eventually. I was always really keen to do sports, but then all of my things sort of like dropped for just another deadline and just another deadline, and every single meeting is in my calendar, but I never had private stuff in there. So I really reserve those spots now. And again, like the weekend, if I leave early, if I leave at 6 or 7 a.m. and I'm back at noonish anyway, and then I have so much more energy and so much more motivation anyhow. So if I still need to get work done, even though it's weekend, I'll just do it later.
That's wonderful. I'm glad that you're able to do that. This is such a pleasure to actually get to know you better and learn about your experiences and talk to you about the things that I care about. So um, I really enjoy the time.
This has been wonderful. This was super inspiring. This was again, thank you so much for sharing so many different points, whether from your personal life now or from your like business perspective. You have such an interesting journey, such a different journey. Are there any last things you wanted to tackle? You feel you want to share?
Well, I know that everyone has their own challenges. For example, I guess I want to tell people that um, be patient, um, be easy on yourself, go easy on yourself. Sometimes people will have a lot of either shame or regret about choices that they made or choices that they didn't make. Um, go easy on yourself. You deserve a lot of patience, and uh, if you can pay attention to what you care about, you'll be okay. You'll be fine. And sometimes it feels like um, everything's falling apart. I've been there, and go easy on yourself. It's gonna be okay.
Thank you so much. I think we might need a second part of this podcast eventually. This was like, I just looked at the time. So this was so inspiring. And I think, like, especially in the realm of tech, we could like talk so much more and a little bit deeper. But thank you so much for your time. Last question: if people want to follow you, if people want to learn more about your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, that's great. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I think it's a great platform for professional networking. So definitely check me out on LinkedIn. I'm Terrance Cohen, Terrance. Cohen is Cohen. Check me out on LinkedIn, and I'd love to meet you.
Thank you so much. All the best. And looking forward to all your new adventures. I think there will be like dozens maybe new adventures and new inspirational, I don't know, journeys you went through already for the next podcast. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
very much. It's been a great pleasure, and I love your work. So let's talk again soon.
Bye.